Hey there, TaxBots. I'm Justin Spicer from the Ohio State Legal Services Association, and I'm here with Melissa Skilleter, Director of the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic of Southeastern Ohio Legal Services, and Megan Sullivan, Director of the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic for the Legal Aid Society of Columbus. Today, we're going to be answering the questions, am I being audited? What is an IRS notice, and what do I do if I get one? And how do I protect my refund? Feel free to leave a comment or a question, and we will answer whatever we can. Melissa, to get started today, when a taxpayer gets a letter from the IRS, does that mean they're being audited?
No, there are a lot of different kinds of letters from the IRS. Letters are the main way the IRS communicates with people about their taxes. We always tell people to open those letters and read them carefully, which of course is right, but people understandably still find those letters really confusing. Very generally, the IRS exams or audits are where the IRS asks the taxpayer to prove credits or deductions that were claimed on their tax returns. In May, we talked about how to respond if the IRS examines your claim for the earned income tax credit. That can be a really long process, and the IRS has to follow a lot of steps before they are allowed to make changes to the taxpayer's return. Those steps are put into place to protect the taxpayer and to give them a fair chance to respond before the IRS takes action. Today, we want to talk about changes the IRS can make pretty quickly without going through the whole examination process. The first example of these sped up processes is called the math error notice. When the taxpayer makes a mistake on a return, like adding numbers wrong or submitting the wrong form, the IRS changes the return and then sends the taxpayer a letter that tells the taxpayer about the mistake that has already been fixed.
So Megan, will that notice be labeled math error notice?
No, unfortunately, the IRS doesn't make it that clear. The notice may say something like changes to your 2022 1040, comma, adjusted refund or amount due. There will also be a notice number in the top right-hand corner that will say CP11, CP12, CP13, or CP16.
So Melissa just said that the IRS changes the return. Does that mean there's nothing the taxpayer can do if they disagree with the IRS?
No, the taxpayer can still disagree and challenge the IRS's decision. First, they should read the notice carefully and try to understand what the IRS has changed on the return and why they made the change. If you disagree with the IRS, you should respond by sending a letter explaining why you think the change to the return was wrong. Include copies of any documents that show the IRS that you are correct. If possible, you should send a copy or send the letter by certified mail within 60 days of the date on the IRS letter. Keep a copy of what you mailed and proof of mailing from the post office. When the IRS gets your letter, they should undo the changes that they made and start following the longer examination process we talked about earlier. This gives the taxpayer more rights to appeal decisions the IRS makes about the return.
So Melissa, what if you miss that 60-day deadline? Does that mean it's too late?
No, it's best to send the letter within the 60 days because you have more rights to challenge the IRS if you do. But if you miss that 60-day mark, you should still respond as soon as you can and provide all the information and documents that Megan just talked about. Definitely better late than never. After the 60 days, the IRS does not have to undo the changes that they made to your return, and you don't have the same protections from the IRS. For example, the IRS will also start trying to collect money it believes you owe from the changes it's already made. You can still respond at that point, but you need to also contact the IRS Collections Department to address the collections issues.
So definitely best to get that in under the 60 days. Okay, great. So Megan, what's another example of the changes the IRS can make to a tax return?
The IRS can also send what are called automated under-reporter notices. This is when the IRS computer compares the income you listed on your tax return to see if it matches the records that it has about income reported under your Social Security number. In January each year, your employer is required to send you a W-2 that reports all of the money you earned from them during the year before and the withholding that was done for your taxes that will be due. You may also get a 1099 from other people or businesses that pay you money. The IRS also receives this information. If the IRS computer sees income that was reported to them that isn't listed on your return, they send a CP2000 notice that describes the income the IRS thinks you should have included and tells you how much additional tax they think you owe. The taxpayer then has 30 days to disagree with the IRS. If the taxpayer doesn't respond, the IRS follows up by issuing a notice of deficiency. At that point, the taxpayer has 90 days to file a petition with the U.S. Tax Court.
So Melissa, that sounds a lot like the audit process. Is this different than that audit process?
Yes, and in an important way. By law, the IRS can only audit or examine a return one time. So this is so that taxpayers don't get bothered over and over again. The IRS is supposed to fix any exam issues all in one go. The process for the underreporter or the math error notices don't count as audits. And so you can go through those processes and also end up having an audit separately.
When does the IRS send these notices? Are these changes done before they send you your tax refund?
In some cases, the IRS will send these notices before they release your tax refund, but you may also receive them after you've already gotten your refund. When you file a tax return, the IRS has at least 3 years from when you file your return to examine the return and to add additional tax. They have more time in cases of fraud or if you leave off a substantial item of income. This means that you can get a tax refund when you file, but still get a notice a couple years later telling you that you need to pay it back. The deadlines for these notices are really important. Be sure to open any mail you get from the IRS and get help right away if you need it.
Great information. Thanks, Melissa, and thanks, Megan. And thanks to everyone for listening. And as a reminder, the video of this session and all the others in our tax chat series are available on our Facebook page. Join us in August when we continue our series about tax issues for people who are self-employed. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.